Well, welcome folks to our latest edition of the Higher Education Chats. I'm so glad that you're here. Thanks for dedicating part of your day to us. It's going to be very much worth your while. Joseph Kursky here on the education industry team at Esri. I'm joined by my colleague, Kanserina Kurnia. Hey, Rena. Greetings and salutations.
Hey, Joseph.
Hey, thanks for being here. And folks, we have a focus today of, as you can see here, StoryMaps best practices. This is largely in response to the survey that you folks have very graciously sent us over the last several weeks and months, telling us about topics that you'd like to see in these monthly chats. For those of you that aren't familiar with these monthly chats, we invite you to join us for others in the future. We've had one on Experience Builder. We had one last month on connecting StoryMaps, dashboards, and ArcGIS Online and surveys. And so there are a variety of topics, but they're all focused on teaching and learning with these tools. It's not just the tools, but how do we, why would I teach with these tools, and how would I teach with these tools? So that's really the focus of these. And also they're allowing us to dig deeper. We know that many of you have used StoryMaps, have taught with StoryMaps, have done research with StoryMaps, but you've sent us some very pointed questions, and we've got a two-part session for you today. First, we're going to start with Karen Beardsley, who's one of our all-time favorite professors. She's up at UC Davis, and she's doing some, well, we would dedicate multiple sessions just to what Karen Beardsley is doing. But today she's going to focus on what she's doing with StoryMaps as collections for highlighting students' research projects and capstone types of projects. And after Dr. Beardsley speaks for a bit, we're going to have a selection, a subset of the stellar, some of our favorite folks in the StoryMaps team here at Esri, Michelle, Alan, and Ross, and others. So that's going to be our time today. We're not going to go into what is a story map and how to, that kind of basic stuff. We're going to dig into the questions that you folks have asked us to address. So again, welcome, and we're glad you're here. And I'm going to turn it over to Karen right now. I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Dr. Beardsley. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Just a minute and let me bring up the screen. Let's see here. We want to do this and this. How's that? Can you guys see the screen?
We see you, Karen.
All right, you see me? You see the presentation?
Not quite.
Oh, okay. So I'm not, okay, wait, share, okay. How about?
It's traversing the, wonderful.
Now.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, all righty. Great, well, thank you, it's great to be here. I'm really only gonna try to take about 5 minutes here and give you a little bit of background on what I have used StoryMaps for in my teaching of GIS and then my discovery of something great called collection, which worked really well for me in my recent class that I taught. So my role at UC Davis is Director of Global Professional Programs. So I'm not strictly a professor. I don't teach GIS all that often, although I have been teaching GIS since 1995, mostly for continuing education. But I had the great privilege of being a Fulbright professor in 2015, 2016. And I was in Bhutan, a small kingdom in the Himalaya Mountains. In fact, the campus I worked at is in the back of me. Here's my background. So I developed a GIS program there. The university has Esri donated software and wonderful experience. And after being there, I started taking a study abroad group from UC Davis in the summertime, 4 weeks, to also do an intro to GIS class. That class had already been at UC Davis for quite some time, but I never taught it until the summer abroad experiences. So the summer abroad, I went in 2018 and 2019 to the campus that you see behind me, bringing 24 UC Davis students there. And I started using doing that after I had transferred everything to ArcGIS Pro. I started using StoryMaps as a tool for students to pull all their information together and share it. And then this summer, instead of going to Bhutan, of course, nobody could go anywhere this summer. Instead of having a full 100% with the students all the time experience, it was my first try at remote learning. So I was asked to teach this, let me move that over. I was asked to teach a 6-week upper division class, practice with 40 students, UC Davis, mostly upper division, some graduate students. 100% remote learning, of course. So we use Canvas as a platform and Zoom. And for lab, this is where it gets a little tricky, right? We have remote desktop access to our GIS lab. But about a third of the students were able to load ArcGIS Pro on their own computers through our licensing that allowed them to do that at UC Davis. So I focused mainly on using ArcGIS Pro as the tool for learning how to use GIS. And remember, these students had no GIS experience. This was a starting from the beginning class. I started to sprinkle some ArcGIS online courses in the middle, with the ArcGIS Pro lessons that they were doing. And then finally, toward the end, they did one exercise in StoryMaps, which allowed them to do what you'll see in a moment. Then I did give a midterm. This was a theory class. I had to focus on theory as well. And when my internet died in the middle of the midterm, I decided maybe this isn't the best way to be giving an exam. So I switched my whole grading process after that terrible midterm experience. I went from having my final exam be 30% of the grade to no final exam, and shifted around the emphasis of the other aspects. The main one being these group projects, so a final project, went from being 25% of the grade to 45% of the grade. And so that's what I'm going to focus on in sharing with you. So the students, again, they had no experience. This was 6 weeks of their lives. And toward the, around the 3rd or 4th week, they started getting into groups. They could either have they could do it alone, or they could have up to 4 people in their group. We were focusing on sustainable development goals. So everything that the students did, they had to attach it to sustainable development goals, of which there are 17. Many aware of this. It's been a big focus in a lot of universities these days, is attaching information to these sustainable development goals. They had to use the geographic approach, which is the Ask, Acquire, Examine, Analyze, Act, and they had to bring that sort of approach into their work. And they had to have at least 1 interactive map. They had to have at least 3 data layers. So these are just all the various criteria that I had. And then I broke it down into the final points for that, which you can see here. I really wanted to have a rubric that the students could understand. They were, building off of that. And so this is kind of, I grabbed this from Geography for Geographers rubrics, if any of you have seen that before. And it really breaks it into these 6 different areas, and then, a grade. So when you put all this together, and again, I modified this to some degree to meet the criteria that I was looking for. And so all of this 48, or about half of their final project grade. So just kind of to sum it up, there was a lot of challenge in lecturing to Zoom boxes. Many of you have experienced this, of course. There were technical glitches in students trying to access the lab. It was not a good testing environment. I don't like online testing. You never know when students, you really can't control it. There was also a lot of issues with group versus individual projects. Editing story maps, I now realize that there's a way that more than one person can edit a story map, but my inexperience didn't allow me to know that before the class started. Also, moving data between Pro and ArcGIS Online was a little tricky. Some things you could do in one place, and some things you could only do in the other. And then finally, permissions. If I have students putting together these projects, then I put them into a collection. If they didn't share everything with everybody, it wouldn't show up. So there was a lot of work that had to go around that. So finally, just a couple of the resources I put here, and I think we can share this, this PowerPoint or these resources with everybody, but these are the only 2 lessons the students did in ArcGIS.com, the Getting Started, and the Poverty and Demographic Analysis in Detroit for Child Poverty. These are both in learn.arcgis.com. So I thought they were great, and just giving that really quick and pretty in-depth look into how to use ArcGIS Online. And then, of course, Dr. K, Joseph Kursky's geomorphology field trip lesson, that's the only way that they learned about story maps, other than a little lecture that I did. So that's what they learned. That was it. And then I let them out there to do their thing. And they came together with 21 different projects. And I put those together into a collection. So this is where I finally got to see that there's this wonderful way that you can put all these different projects into a collection. And oddly enough, just this morning, I realized that there's a new feature in collection in August that allows you to edit the details of each of those stories. So this was a way of putting together each of the students' projects into one place. And there's sort of different ways you can look at it. And I'm not by no means the expert in this, but it's a tool that I found super useful for what I wanted to do. So if we click on the first one, this is my students. This is probably the best of the projects, was Going Green in San Francisco. And they first thing they did was tie it to a sustainable development goal, in this case, sustainable cities. And then they proceeded in going through this project, giving a lot of basic information. Talking about the scope. Then they asked a question. They had different maps that they put together. They had an interactive map, and so on. They had a couple of different. I wish this would show up because it's a really good map. So the students really took on this challenge, did a great job, and then I've said this was a wonderful way to put all of these together into one place. So I could easily. But also someone else could look at this collection and see what people did. So some of the projects were in California. There's a Howler Monkeys in Belize. One woman looked in Tanzania at empowering equitable exploration. So it's just a wonderful, I don't have time to go through them, but we'll provide a link if you'd like to see how this all came together. And I'm happy to talk to anyone more about what we do here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Beardsley. We'll put your collection there in the chat box so folks can peruse the wonderful resource. This is really pertinent because I and my teammates get questions, and I'm sure the StoryMaps team does as well, from professors and teachers saying, how do I assess student work using these tools? And I think you've shown a great set of examples, actually, not just one method, but a couple of different things that people can try, so much appreciated. And I also think that, your tale of having to shift things around speaks to that whole theme that we've heard over the last 6 months of resilient instructors in the face of disruptive change. So I think you're a great example of that. And so thanks for sharing and for being the innovative educator that you are. Speaking of experts, you talked about that briefly. We've got, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, some of the stellar StoryMaps team here at Esri. And many of these folks are familiar to you because they've been so active on GeoNet and elsewhere. But we really appreciate having Michelle and Alan and Ross and Liz and others on that team. So I'm going to turn it over to them to address some of the things that you folks have told us that you wanted them to address here in this session. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Okay, thanks Joseph. I'm Alan Carroll. I founded the StoryMaps team going on 10 years ago now, just a couple of months short of 10 years, which is kind of shocking to me how time flies. I'm going to share my screen so I can show you a story that Michelle on our team put together in the last couple of days. And I'm going to move kind of quickly in the interest of our very limited time. So the main thing I want you to see is the shortcut to see this story yourself. You can, of course, peruse it at your leisure after we're done. So bit.ly/higher education chat will get you right to the story. It's been a huge thrill for us to see this community of storytellers really taking off, and maybe doubly thrilling, triply thrilling to see how StoryMaps are really gaining traction in both K through 12 and colleges and universities. And in fact, we're starting to make plans to more proactively serve the education community because it's become such an important part of our audience and is so important to Esri as well. So this story starts out with a few examples of the various uses of StoryMaps within the education community. And again, I'm not going to take the time to link through to these stories, so you can because you can do so on your own time. You've just seen Karen demonstrate the UC Davis collection. We're seeing a number of StoryMaps as essentially as scholarly, almost like scholarly journal articles. And in fact, there's an ongoing discussion and let us know if you're interested in joining this discussion. But it's been a bit interrupted by the COVID crisis, but there's a move afoot to at least discuss the potential for a peer-reviewed journal, the articles of which would take the form of story maps, or it might be something like a sort of clearinghouse of scholarly story maps, each of which might link back to a more traditional journal. So that's an exciting possibility that's just perhaps getting underway. Here's another kind of scholarly effort of summary of field research in the Middle East called the Kingdom of Copper. Virtual field trip. I suppose any field trip to the moon kind of has to be virtual these days. But again, a few of many exciting examples of story maps. This is kind of cool. These are the environmental studies majors at Tufts University. So it's a collection of very short story maps that serve as little bios for each of the majors. So with that, I'm going to just move on into some of the questions that have been asked prior to the to our convening the session. One of which is what's the what's the difference between our classic apps and the newer ArcGIS story maps? It's been out more than a year now, and is way beyond its beta stage, and is really quite robust and continuing to improve. So first, I should reassure you, and through you, your students, that all the classic apps remain accessible and will remain so for many years to come. So there's no need to switch immediately to ArcGIS story maps. That said, we're really excited about it, and we think it's got lots of advantages, and I'll list a few. One is that ArcGIS story maps combines into a single builder almost all of the functions of the classic story maps, with more to come. And in addition, it's got functions like a slideshow interactive or immersive that none of the classic apps had. So you can find lots and lots of rich stuff, including this variety of immersive experiences within a single builder. A second advantage is that we've added a second way to create maps. It's called Express Maps, and it's designed specifically for people without experience with ArcGIS who just want to create a relatively simple map showing, say, a series of points or a route or an area or simple annotations on a map. Another advantage is that we've updated the design. So we've been around long enough, again, going on a decade, that our older classic apps were starting to look a little old and dated in terms of their design. So we've got this really exciting, I think, slick new design with several different options for formatting your stories. And I think Owen's going to get into that a little bit more in a bit. There's also an improved publishing workflow, excuse me, where you can work on drafts. If you've published the story, then you can open it up, edit it, and then once you've made a series of edits, you can then publish it, and it replaces your earlier story map. And then another big advantage is that we've worked really hard to make ArcGIS story maps as mobile friendly as possible. The other ones are, but we've really optimized the new story maps for the best possible performance on mobile devices, and of course, as well as tablets and PCs. So I'm going to pass the baton to Ross, who's going to tackle the working together thing.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be on with you all. So a number of you were asking questions around how can students work together in groups. For instance, if you have a course where you want 2 or more students working together to create one story, what's the best way to accomplish that? And a lot of educators have been asking us this question. A lot of organizations have been asking us this question. So a number of us on the team kind of put our heads together to think through some of the different workflows. And we've published a blog post all about this. So it walks you through 3 different scenarios. One, say you want more than one student to be sort of co-authoring a story. Another workflow is you want to be able to create a guide or template for your students to follow. And the third is wanting to share a story with folks outside of your organization before it goes public. Now, I'm not going to get into the technical nitty-gritty of it. We could spend the whole webinar on that, but I will just give some high-level sort of how does it all work. These workflows use ArcGIS online groups. So if you're not familiar with those, it's a functionality within an ArcGIS online organization or ArcGIS organization where you can create a collection of items that are within one place, and you can publish items directly to those groups. Now within the groups, there's some really powerful settings. If you are an administrator of the account or have a role set up within your university or organization where you can create groups that allow members of the group to update or modify content that's in the group, it really enables this co-authoring workflow. Now there's no collaborative editing functionality directly in ArcGIS StoryMaps, but by using these group settings, you can share a story to the group and then have multiple people work on it. And so having conversations with your GIS administrator will really enable these projects to run smoothly. And you can set up the workflow for a specific class. And once you've established it, you can replicate that for future classes moving forward. There's a couple questions that came in about who owns the story after the project is completed or after a student graduates. Now, you know, with each university, it'll be a little bit different how you want to archive or manage your stories that are created. One very simple workflow would be to take a story that perhaps a graduating senior has published, and instead of that just disappearing, you can change the owner to be either the professor or the GIS administrator or the GIS library. So the ownership of that story then is transferred, and in doing so, it will stay within the organization as students graduate and as time passes. We're talking about different ways to do that on our team, but that would probably be the easiest low-hanging fruit solution. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Owen to talk a little bit about the latest features. And feel free to chime in, Owen, on anything that I left out or other best practices.
No, that all sounded great, Ross. Thanks. Yes, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about some things that we've released over the last couple of months, and then talk about some things that are coming on the road ahead. So just over the last 2 months, we've had a lot of features been released. So we're actually on a very accelerated release schedule now. We don't release just every quarter like the rest of ArcGIS Online does. We actually release about every 2 weeks or maybe every month now. So we've got a lot more software going out quicker. So we're able to respond to requests faster, and we really are trying to work to make sure the product is very stable and it's very feature rich. So we hope that everyone's enjoying all the releases that we pushed out recently. Some of the big features that we've released, one I know that's big for the education community is the simultaneous editor warning. Ross was just talking about collaborative editing. Unfortunately, we don't have real-time collaborative editing in ArcGIS. That's something that's a really big technical challenge. Hopefully we'll get there someday. Right now, people can work on the same story, but if they work on at the exactly the same time, there's a potential to lose work. So we've added a warning so that this doesn't happen. We really wanted to make sure that people were aware of this, not just in our documentation, but right in the software itself. So we really believe that this is gonna help people not kind of run into some bad situations anymore. So that's gonna be right there in the application. You'll get warned if someone else is editing the story at the same time, so students won't overwrite each other's work. And that situation will be reduced. We also added the ability to add attribution to images and videos. We obviously know that it's always important to cite your sources, and there have been ways to put this in a story map, but now we've got a dedicated area for this. So we think that people are going to enjoy that and put that to very good use. We've already seen a lot of good uses of that as well. We also added the ability for the builder to use your photo geotags when you're locating guided tour places. This is sort of the first release of this software. We've got some more planned that I'll mention in a minute, but now when you upload a picture that has a geotag, we'll recognize that and will allow you to place your guided tour location using that photo geotag. It was great to see the demonstration of collections, and glad to hear that that's being put to good use. We've got lots planned for collections, and recently we added some new navigation options, which are similar to some of the layouts that we had in our classic map series template. So that's sort of the bulleted layout or the tab layout where you've got titles across the top of the page and you can click on each one to get to the next item. And then that, coupled with the ability to edit the items that was mentioned before, makes it really nice to be able to really customize your collection so that it presents exactly how you want it. Even if you're using content from other people, you sort of have the ability to override the titles and the thumbnails to manage and organize your collection and make it look exactly how you like. We had lots of audio features released this year, and those features came out of beta now. So those are now in the product and ready to go for anybody to use in any of their stories. We also made it much easier to get embed code for embedding a story into another web page. This was always possible, but if you're not a coder or a developer, you might have to kind of do a little research to figure out how to generate that code. Now we've got a little option in the header to just click on that and to grab the embed code, so you can put that in your blog or any other web page. And then also we added the ability to build a swipe not only with 2 maps, but also 2 images, which is something that was never possible in our classic apps. And that's something that's available in the current generation product, which we've also seen people put to good use as well. We've seen pictures of sort of air quality before and after COVID and other things that are kind of really interesting comparisons of images. So those are just a few of the things we've released just in the last 2 months. What's coming in the next couple of months? Well, a lot more for sure. Something that we're very excited about on our team is something we're calling our Explorer Tour. If you're familiar with the guided tour that's available now, the Explorer Tour is going to be another type of tour. So the guided tour is sort of optimized for a smaller set of places where you want to lead somebody through sequentially in those places, right? Just like the name implies, a guided tour. The Explorer Tour is going to be optimized for larger sets of places, up to about 100, where you just want the reader to kind of have the ability to navigate around and go wherever the wind takes them in that set of places. They can explore however they want, just like the name implies there. So it's going to be very similar to the classic shortlist template and take a lot of design cues from that template. So fans of that will be excited to see the new Explorer Tour when we release that in a month or so. The other exciting thing when we're going to release that Explorer Tour is that both Explorer and the guided tours will support a couple of new building options. Right now, they'll support building tours manually. So you just enter you upload a photo, you enter the title and description. We'll also be supporting a bulk upload of a set of geotagged photos to create those tours, and also connecting to your GIS data. So in the form of a feature service, where you can manage your tour places in a feature service and have those be updated in your story map. So lots of exciting things coming in the area of our tours in the story builder. One of the other big things that we're working on is our theme builder, and this will allow you to create your own theme, which is something that we've been working towards, and we kind of proved out the concept of themes in the builder now with sort of some out-of-the-box options. Now we're going to open up the capability to be able to build your own themes. So you'll be able to define your colors, your fonts, and the different block styles that you use, the express map, base maps that you use, and that sort of thing. And initially in the first release, this will be in beta, and it'll just be for your own use. But we'll quickly expand that to be able to share those themes with others, because we know that's something that's really important to people. People want to be able to create a theme and then share that across their organization or share that with their team so that others can all use the same sets of design principles in the stories that they're building. A couple other things I'll just mention briefly are an outline view. This will basically be sort of a compact or mini version of your story structure that you'll be able to use in Builder to jump back and forth into different sections really easily and set other aspects of your story. So we're working on that as well. And then a popular feature from our Cascade template that we're working on is the ability to have image galleries. So you'll be able to kind of mosaic or collage multiple images together to make a nice visual impact in your story with a set of images. We've got a bunch more planned for collections, including the ability to add a logo and apply a theme to a collection, including those custom themes you'll be able to build yourself soon, and also some new cover layouts. which is basically right now you saw that grid, which is sort of the layout that you see when you load a collection now. We're going to be expanding that with some new options where there'll sort of be some different sized thumbnails and some different arrangements of that content on the homepage to kind of make different visual impacts there. So we've got a lot more planned, but I just wanted to kind of go through a few things there to give everybody an idea of what we've got coming and what's been out and released recently. So happy to answer any questions later, but at this point, I think I'm turning it over to Michelle, I think, to talk about the contest.
Great, thanks, Owen. Well, Dr. Beardsley's presentation was perfect timing because this year, the StoryMaps contest, which we host each year, we have a partner organization, the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and the focus of the competition is the Sustainable Development Goals. So what we're asking is that people create a story map that addresses one or more of the Sustainable Development Goals, and they can enter through, anybody can enter through the professional category, or there's also a student category, and it's specifically for students in higher education, which is, again, timely for this particular chat. It is open now. Students can submit their stories all the way through November 25th. They can work individually or they can work in and submit as one participant. And you can find out more about that contest on esri.com/storymaps/contest. So we hope that you'll share that with your students and that they'll get involved in that contest. And we also have added some resources to the story map specifically for you. The first is a StoryMaps Live webinar. If you're not familiar with StoryMaps Live, every few months we host a webinar. It's a free webinar. And the StoryMaps team talks about the latest features that have been released, give a little bit of a demo. But with every StoryMaps Live, we have a featured storyteller. In our coming StoryMaps Live, we have Miriam Oliveris from Yale, and she'll have a student and possibly someone else with her to talk a little bit about what they're doing there specifically with storytelling and give some best practices with that. We've also added some links to ArcGIS StoryMaps training, more formal training with Esri, great curriculum and grading rubric from the University of Minnesota portal, and some different instructional stories, including a whole collection of instructional stories just specific to ArcGIS StoryMaps features. So we hope that those will be helpful to you. And towards the bottom of this story, you'll also find all the different ways that you can connect with us on the website, Twitter, Instagram, GeoNet, and through YouTube as well. So I think I'm kicking it back over to Joseph to take your questions about StoryMaps.
This is great. I've learned a whole bunch of new things today, and I trust that the community gathered here, over 100 strong, has done the same. So we've answered, my teammates and I have answered some of the questions on here. Rena, what do you think? There's a couple of ones up here that we probably should turn over to the StoryMaps team.
Yes, and anybody that want to speak up as well, ask question directly, feel free to do so. Unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and ask the question. Did we answer already the question on embedded survey 1, 2, 3?
No, we didn't, and that's entirely possible to do. And we've done it ourselves within our team several times. And Ross Donahue has done a blog about it. Ross, you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, so one of the really powerful features of ArcGIS StoryMaps is the ability to take content that's created outside of ArcGIS StoryMaps and bring it right into your story. Survey 1, 2, 3 is no different. Essentially, you can use the embed block to make this happen with any survey. Once it's published, it will have a URL associated with it. You just take that URL and put it into the embed block. Now, you can customize this a little bit with iframe parameters. So if you want your survey to be longer, or if you want to change the look and feel of it a little bit, you can just use an iframe parameter, paste that into the embed block, and you'll have your form directly there. Now, when you bring in anything with that embed link or embed block, you can have it in card view or in interactive display view. So if you want people to fill out the form without having to leave the story, you can have it in the interactive view. If you want people to, go outside of the story to fill out the form, you can have it in card view. And you can customize the card details, things like adding a thumbnail or a description. Those are great ways to enhance your stories and provide that relevant information.
Yeah, just to add to what Ross is saying, thanks, Ross. For anybody interested in connecting pieces of the ArcGIS platform, that's the beauty, the wonder, the glory of these tools, is that you can combine them effectively. You might want to take a look at the August chat. We've got it recorded, and it's on the GeoNet post that Rena or I will put in the chat box. But basically, it talks about that very thing, connecting surveys, story maps, dashboards. I'm always thinking, though, about what Alan taught me years ago, and that was just because you can doesn't mean you should. So you got to think about your audience, and just because you can embed within an embed within an embed, you can combine these tools in quite a few ways. But again, the idea is to communicate clearly. And so, Alan, I took notes, and I still think about that all these years later. So, but yes, there are numerous ways that you can combine these tools, and that's really the power of the. Thanks, Ross.
And Ross, there is a few questions related to the collaborative editing here. So your advice is the group, give the capability for the group to the ability to edit, right? But if two students editing at the same time, one is safe and the other is not, will something lost in between or not?
Yeah, so Owen mentioned that there's a new notification feature that will actually let you know if somebody else has been editing, and that you will either overwrite their edits or you want to exit the story itself.
Oh, that's good.
Now, we often recommend letting people in your group know when you're going into the builder to make text edits or change maps and things like that. So there's a clear communication, and it's just a good best practice to set at the very beginning of any new project that you have this communication so that you don't lose content. That can be really frustrating for a student or for anyone. We've all lost work before. It's really frustrating. We often will write all of the copy for our stories in a Word document just so that we have a backup. And it's easier to sort of edit and share that around before actually getting into the builder and building out the story. So consider recommending that to your students or when you're writing that.
Yeah, good point. And along the same lines, we hear from educators occasionally how they've creatively had students in groups. So, one person's working on the analysis tools, the other student's working on the story map, the other student is out in the field collecting data or setting up the survey. So yeah, lots of creativity out there.
I got a question here from the chat from Rosanna. I know that you have collection, but is there any way to replicate the idea of tabs with the theme like you had in the old classic StoryMaps format?
So there are now different layout options for collections. So there's the standard one where you see all three layouts start with a grid view of all the items within the collection. But then once you start to tab through the collection or click on a map, on a story rather, then you either see the story filling the screen with a way to go back to the sort of gallery view, but there's also the option to have each item within the collection appear as a series of tabs or as a series of bullets. Now it doesn't exactly replicate the classic series app, but it does reflect those aspects of it and adds a lot of flexibility to collections. And as Owen said, there are future enhancements coming to collections that will make them even more powerful.
Another question in here is, I think we haven't really talking about this, about citations. So have we standardized methodology for embedding citations?
Gee, no, we don't have a super standard way of embedding citations. We have a credit section at the end of a story that you can link. You can cite your sources there and include hyperlinks to those sources. And some authors put citations simply at the end of the story proper. So there's a variety of ways to do it. And of course, you can also embed citations directly within the text, although if there are too many of them, they can be distracting. So it's really up to the individual author, but we kind of recommend that credit section at the end that is a nice way to kind of package up those credits and citations and things.
I also use buttons for citations a lot of times. So my students would often use buttons, like they create a button and then as for a citation. So
yeah, that's another nice option. It's visually kind of dominant, so it's if there are lots of buttons, that can be a drawback, but it's a nice way to do it and provide a very direct and obvious link to the source.
Yeah, it fits very nicely in what we're always encouraging students to do, right? And that is, hey, it's great that we've got these capabilities of combining all these images, maps, and other data layers into a ArcGIS Online environment map or story map. But do you know where the sources are? Do you have permission to use them? All that discussion. That's one of the reasons why I love teaching with story maps. I know many of you would do as well, because it taps into all these other things we want the students to really think about.
And I would also just mention that Superscript is compatible with ArcGIS StoryMaps. So like if you have a tiny one at the end of a story, do that, and then at the credit section, put in that little tiny one and have that more academic look and feel. You can also hyperlink that Superscript text. So there's lots of options.
If I may jump in here, hi everybody. This is super exciting. I'm going to be using this for the first time this semester, and I'm very inspired by everything that already exists and that what folks have done. From a classroom management perspective, my question is there a way I can assemble my students' projects in a draft form so that I can help work with them on that in almost like a collection or a sort of folder, but before they get published? And part of the reason I'm asking is because some of my students might be doing some projects that are very personal. They might be doing like personal environmental histories and be talking about things that they don't necessarily want to be published yet until they're really finished. But from a professorial point of view or pedagogical point of view, I need to be able to work with them on that and kind of have them all in one place. So I'm wondering if there is a way to create almost a draft collection box or a folder where all of my students would have their stuff in that space and I could work with them.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't quite heard exactly that, but it's certainly doable. So there are three publishing options for an author. That you can publish simply to yourself and it's not visible to anybody. You can publish to your organization or a group within the organization, or you can publish it to everybody. So I think the key to answering your question or your challenge is that second option. So if you publish to a group, then those, and correct me if I'm wrong, Owen and Ross, but that means those stories can be aggregated into a collection that's only visible to members of that group, yourself included.
Yep, yeah, that should work. Yeah, so it's just kind of limited publishing. So it is published, but it's not published to sort of to everybody or even to the whole organization. So I think that might meet your use case, Logan. I was just responding a little bit to you in the chat there, and we can expand on that just based on this discussion here. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add along those lines that I had a class group, and then the project group, the project groups have their own subgroups, so they could develop their work with themselves and not have the whole class see it, but then they could elevate it to the class level and finally to everyone.
Yeah, great. I just want to briefly reiterate what Karen said earlier, which is that students are very, very quick to pick up on story maps and seem to more or less instantaneously learn the builder function. And Dave Cowan, who's on the session, has said, story maps become a kind of, and maybe not the most elegant of terms, but a sort of gateway drug to the whole geospatial realm for a lot of students. So some students, say in a humanities course, might create a story map as a class assignment and then get turned on to GIS via the mapping functions within StoryMap. So that's been one of the most exciting things to me about witnessing this rapid increase in popularity of story maps within the education realm.
We've got about 30 more seconds to a minute or so, folks, if you want to sneak in a couple of last questions for the experts here.
Yeah, I love this comment from Amy Crossan.
Mm-hmm.
We say story leads to map. We've seen this happen several times where students start with a simple story, then dig deeper into the maps. And that's music to our ears.
It's very true.
I'm sorry I'm late to this discussion, and perhaps this has been answered. One of my customers here at the University of Delaware, professor, she would like to offer multiple students editing one story map. And we have done this in spring. It wasn't possible. Is it something we can do now?
Yeah, we covered that earlier in the discussion, but basically multiple people can play a role in creating a story map. They just can't do it simultaneously. And that's something, it's a big technical challenge, something we're thinking about, but is a ways off. So as Owen said, we've added or about to add a little warning. So if somebody's actively editing a story and somebody else who has access to that story goes into the edit mode, they get a warning that somebody else is, don't tread on me, that somebody else is working on the story. So we hope that's going to help with.
That's already there. And
it's already there.
Yeah. Yep. And Ross mentioned the blog that he and Liz wrote with a lot of workflow examples and how to set that up. So yeah, you can check out that link in the story that's been shared in the chat.
This is a good question in here. Thanks, Olena. There is if there is a photo upload to the StoryMap wrong orientation, how can we ensure that the photo upload right side up rather than upside down?
Sure, that's an issue that we've seen. It's we've been troubleshooting it for a while. Unfortunately, there's no standard way for browsers and other and photos to kind of store and read this information simultaneously. So we have narrowed it down to a few things. It's an issue on our side for sure, and we're trying to address it. We're also working with our backend team as well. So we're hoping that in the next couple of weeks we'll have a solution for that. So we apologize for that and people that have run into that. Doesn't affect every photo, but there are some photos that just have the location information stored in a weird way that is hard for the browser to read properly. We have seen that sometimes you can open up the photo in just your own desktop image editor and just kind of force rotate it around all the way, rotate it 4 times, and that'll kind of restore the location or the rotation information and then try it that way. So that may help. It also sometimes doesn't help, but that's something that you can try. So, but we are looking into that.
Yeah, thanks, Owen. All right, folks. Sadly, we knew this would happen, but we're really out of time. We're trying to keep these to 45 minutes-ish, but you know how to contact us. We've got teams here at Esri standing by to support you in your educational goals. We've got the StoryMaps team, the education industry team, and colleagues of ours if we don't know the answer. Plus, we get a lot of really excellent information from you all. It's not just us transmitting information. We get tons back. So keep those discussions going on GeoNet and elsewhere. And that's how we're going to all move forward together. So again, appreciate the colleagues here that have been on here with me. from the StoryMaps team and my own team, the education industry team with Rena and some of our other colleagues, and you, the user community, the educators. You're the real heroes, especially in these disruptive times, to actually want to do innovative things when you've got all this other stuff going on. It's really commendable and it's inspiring. So thanks for being a part of this community, folks. Any last words from you, Rena, or anyone?
Yes, I just want to tell that all the recording of our chat will be in the same blog. So if you go, I put the chat in the chat there. That blog is always have the past and the future chat, including the recording, resources link, and everything.
I got one quick question. I'm a real newbie at this, but is there somebody I can talk to as a human being on the phone, I mean, and get things started?
Yes, absolutely. So go ahead, Joseph.
Sure, Rick. The nice thing about these teams, we're not like some of those websites where you go and it says have a question. It's like a bot, right? It's not a real human being.
Yeah.
I've been to many of those sites. Maybe you have too. But we're actually real people, and we're all educators. We love doing what you're doing. So feel free to contact any of us. We do have a higher ed at Esri.com, and that'll go to several of us. We've got a colleague that basically parses them out to different people on the team. So we've got that email as well. Let me type it in here. So yeah, Rick, we don't want you to have to go alone here. We're here to support you.
Yeah, Joseph Kursky put his email. I put my email as well as the higher ed, Esri.com. So Rick, reach us and we can set a meeting.
Hey, thank you.
You bet. Thank you all. All right. Thanks, folks. Have a great day. Thanks for letting us be a small part of your day, and appreciate it. Map on.